Yo, what's up? This is Eldritch Terror, and welcome back to my channel where I like to talk about all things spooky, scary, and have a little bit of fun. Today on the channel, we are going to be talking about Final Destination Bloodlines. Yes, the latest chapter is finally here, and we're gonna break it down, review it, explain the whole thing, talk about the ending, go over everything that this adds to the lore of the franchise, and so much more. Yes, this is a movie that people have been waiting not just over the year for, but straight up over a decade. The Final Destination film series has collected a lot of diehard fans over the years, and together this fan base has been doing our best theory crafting, going over all of the little bits of information that have trickled out about this new film over the years. And really, this is a string that we've been unraveling for a long time. But speculate no longer. The film is here, you can go see it, and today we are going to break it all down. Final Destination Bloodlines is the long-awaited 6th installment in the American supernatural horror film series Final Destination. You'd either have to be sleeping under a rock or hard-dodging spoilers to have made it this long without hearing about this movie. Coming 14 years after the last film, this one centers around Stephanie Reyes as a college student who inherits her grandmother Iris's sudden premonitions about death. She tries her best to save her entire family, but very soon after, they start to die off one by one in the very order predicted by old grandma. One of the first bits of information that we got about this film is that it was going to be some sort of a light reboot of sorts. They wanted us to know that they weren't going to be scrapping everything or completely changing anything, but that this was going to be a refresher for the series where some things would be changed. So going into this, I was really curious which things would be changed and which would stay the same. Which rules would be altered? Would they talk about the old movies in this film? How would they all connect together? And what does this all mean for William Bloodworth? Tony Todd recently passed away, RIP to a legend. And this would be not only his final role in the series, but his final role in film, period. This franchise was one that he held really close to his heart, and he really wanted to explore more themes about his character going into this one. There was at one point a rumor even that this entire film could center around his character altogether. But with him being ill and passing before this thing was released, our expectations have to be kept kinda low as far as what his capacity is gonna be here. Still, this is one of the many questions that we have going into this thing. The biggest question is this movie going to be good? Depending on who you ask, the last few Final Destination films kind of fell flat. The diehards and other audiences really appreciated them, but some people just didn't really like the whole thing. So now, some 15 years later, can Final Destination Bloodline breathe some new life into the series? Before we get into all the spoilers, I'm just gonna tell you, for me personally, yes, I did very much so enjoy this movie. I liked it a lot more. I liked it so much more than the last couple that I've seen here. And while there were some gripes that I had about it, which we'll talk about as we go through the movie, there was a lot of things that I really did like about it as well. This movie felt a lot more cared for, a lot more passionate, a lot more true to the formula than those last few did. In order to explain why I feel like that, we're just gonna have to talk about the whole thing. So without further ado, let's get to the review. The film begins back in 1968, where a young Iris and her boyfriend Paul glide past the train tracks to attend a surprise date at the grand opening of the Skyview restaurant tower. Paul's got big plans for the night and looks to impress Iris with an over-the-top and lavish experience with local elites in attendance. Embracing the awe of the moment and stuffing their way into a crammed elevator, the attendant brags fiercely about how the beautiful structure was opened a whole 5 months before the projected opening date. This is immediately followed by the elevator door getting jammed open, with the attendant having to force it shut before taking the group to the top. This place is on some Gatsby levels of poppin'. We've got live music, a glass dance floor, exotic foods, and everyone in this place is dressed to the nines. While Iris marvels at the diner, Paul is denied at his check-in, with the host telling him that they are well over capacity. Paul argues that he's on the list and given the okay from a friend, but the host doubles down, saying that that friend had been fired earlier in that evening, probably for that very reason. While the host rudely excuses the couple in favor of some guests that he does recognize, Iris grabs Paul and the two sneak over to the bar, joining the party. Looking out over the city view, Iris begins to feel ill and tells her boyfriend the heights are bothering her. She runs to the bathroom, and while she does, we see a small shard from a chandelier fall from above, causing a tiny chip in the glass dance floor below. She barely makes it outside the bathroom when she settles for a garbage bin instead. Here, the hired singer exits the stage, and we see her attending to her young son. She notices Iris falling ill and asks how long she's been pregnant. Knowing she's been found out, Iris admits it's been about a month or two by this point, though she's still working up the courage to tell her boyfriend. When she returns to him, Paul suggests some air to make them feel a little better. The roof provides another outstanding view, but we notice a few other things up here too. Firstly, a woman's hat blows off of the tower. Second, we see a snot-nosed little brat chucking pennies from the highest point of the building. Here, Paul proposes to Iris, and in response, she informs him that they're going to be having a baby together. The two are over the moon as Paul squeezes the ring over Iris's finger. It's a very tight fit, but from From there, the two run to the dance floor to celebrate. On the way out, we see that bratty child throw a penny and it gets pulled back into the tower through an air vent, lodging it into a blade that eventually breaks and sends it flying into a gas line. Unaware of all of that, the tower's guests dance the night away, bumping, jumping, and stressing the glass, which is now developed from having a small crack to a giant spider web of cracks in the middle of the floor. Meanwhile, the metal foundation of the building has also begun to break apart as screws and pins pop free of the supports. Just as the guests are feeling the bliss of the evening, the floor completely gives out, sending a ton of people tumbling to the ground. Paul manages to grab a hold of a pane of glass, but unable to hold on to the sharp shards, inevitably gives in to gravity. On the other side of the restaurant, the commotion causes a chef to lose control of his flame, causing a woman to catch fire, and as she runs panic, she intercepts the broken gas line, causing a massive explosion that consumes half of the building. With the building now completely falling apart, the elevator op leads the crowd to the stairwell, where the child, who was seen earlier throwing pennies, rushes in first, cutting off the others. The weight of the crowd pushing into the small unsupported area proves to be too much, and a chunk of wall gives out, sending everyone on the stairwell tumbling below. Well, everyone besides the kid, actually. He slips away by the skin of his teeth. Turning now to the elevator, everyone pushes in, causing it to overfill, and the restaurant's host can't seem to make the capacity. The elevator's cables give out, sending the unit plummeting freefall and splitting the host in half. Somehow making matters even worse, half of the room begins to shift and tilt as it separates from the tower. Iris makes it to safety, but the rest aren't so lucky. Remember that penny, by the way? It comes back just to bounce onto the edge of the piano, tipping it over and smashing the windows, releasing more people as they gruesomely rain to the ground below. The penny-throwing child makes it out of the building, feeling safe, having been the only one to make it through that stairwell. This is definitely me speaking too soon, though, because that very piano, tipped over by that very penny, makes its way to the ground where it slams into the child. Now the only one left above in the tower, Iris finds the singer's son at the very last moment and grabs him before taking a leap of faith from the tumbling rubble. She grabs hold of a ledge, but is only being held up by some of the rebar wrapped around her engagement ring. This isn't going to be enough to cut it, but it is enough to cut the skin from her finger, sending her and the child plummeting to their deaths. Now, switching to present day, college student Stephanie Reyes suffers from a series of reoccurring nightmares where she lives through the very night of the collapse. It's become a serious problem where she can't sleep and is subsequently failing her classes. After yet another sleepless night, she confides in her roommate that the dream centers around her grandmother Iris, who she's never even met before. Encouraged by that roommate's advice, she returns home seeking some answers. So, that's one way to start the movie, isn't it? Interesting, in this one, they decided that the premonition at the beginning should be swapped out with a dream sequence, and a dream sequence held by somebody who's not even involved in the initial incident. The premonition part of this movie takes up almost a quarter of the runtime here, really establishing everything that's going on and spending its time getting out all the red herrings. I found this interesting when I was first watching it because I was wondering how we were going to roll this into the main storyline. In the previous Final Destinations, we've had a lot of like omens or signs, pictures, images, dreams, all kinds of things that would make people kind of understand what was coming when their turn was up. But in this movie, I was curious how they were going to do something like that, being that none of these people were actually there at the initial incident. These are just questions to keep in mind moving forward. One thing I do gotta say, man, is that these kills are vicious. All of these deaths looked absolutely crazy, and they are CGI. There's so much CGI in this movie, there's like nothing practical, I promise you. But the way that they did that CGI just looks so gross and disturbing that I don't really mind it too much. I mean, it's Final Destination, we knew that it was gonna come with CGI, so at least it's done in a way that seems very entertaining and just viscerally disgusting. We're only just getting started though, we're only cracking the surface, so let's get into the rest of the movie and see where this takes us. Returning home, Stephanie is warmly greeted by her father, but her brother Charlie seems to have some sort of an issue with her. Stephanie asks her dad about Grandma Iris, but he's immediately off-put by the topic and gives her a stern warning not to bring this up to her Uncle Howard. Wanting to join her brother in his routine and still looking for some answers, the two siblings go to visit their Uncle Howard anyway. Here we meet their Aunt Brenda, as well as their three cousins, the edgy oldest son Eric, his stuck-up younger sister Julia, and their little brother, the socially awkward Bobby. Julia and Charlie quickly get to some gossip talking about his latest date planned with a girl at school, and this clearly throws Stephanie off a bit as she feels excluded by the two. They used to be so close before she went off to college, turning her attention away to the bigger matters at hand. Stephanie asks Big Unc Howard about his mother, and just like her father predicted, he is less than excited to hear about this. He gets extremely uncomfortable and explains to her that his mother was just not well in the head. She subjected him and Stephanie's mom to a dark and miserable upbringing. It even got so bad that they were removed by protective care. After they were taken from her, Iris became reclusive. As soon as he leaves the room, Stephanie moves the pressure onto Brenda, who slips her the letters that she'd collected from Iris, leading her to the fortified cabin in the woods where Iris now lives. And Grandma confirms that that was in fact her original premonition. She explains that she saved everyone that night, and that Death has spent the last 56 years cleaning up the mess. Iris is worn down from the years in hiding. It is very clear that she's got more than a few screws loose, as she calls out to Death, yelling at him constantly in defiance, and she shows her granddaughter her book, which she declares her life's work. In it, she claims are the keys to survival. Over the years, their family tree has been kept safe by her holding back Death's plan. But now that she's been diagnosed terminally, Death's whispers of warning have been passed on to her granddaughter. This is all too much for Steph, and overwhelmed, she begins to try and leave. Iris chases her to the door, but stopping in the entry, she has a brief premonition. Knowing that Death is coming for her in one way or another, she gives in to the design in hopes of proving a point. And, prove her point it does. I don't think Steph is ever gonna recover from seeing Iris's head blown up by a metal rod that had been blown over by the wind into a fire extinguisher and then propelled through the air. Okay, so Grandma's house is supposed to be a safe house, right? The way that they set this thing up is like similar to how Clear went and stayed in a mental asylum back in Final Destination 2 because she wanted to keep herself safe. But where Clear went was like a padded room where she was super safe, she was checked on by security, there was nothing that could harm her or anything like that in there. Grandma's house is literally the most dangerous place that you could possibly imagine. I know that the word literally is overused these days, but I promise it is literally as dangerous as possible. This thing's got like giant rusted wrought iron gates just covered in barbed wire, and the entire yard is just covered in these insane like post-apocalyptic barriers. Like straight up sharpened spear barriers are all over this place. There's so much that can kill you. Why on earth is this supposed to be her safe spot? I do not understand. This is like my biggest gripe with this movie. It just makes no sense that she would go here. And she dies within maybe 5 to 10 minutes of us being on the property. Like, it just lines up so quickly. I do not understand. Is the thought here that she's trying to keep people out, or like things out that could come in and harm her? Because external forces in that sense have never been a thing in the Final Destination series before, so I don't know why we would think something like that would happen. But even still, this woman's prepared for an army assault. This is insane. She looks less afraid of Death coming after her and more afraid of the government. But let's talk about Grandma's book here for a minute. Let me explain to you what this is. Grandma's book is a compendium that she's made showing everybody that was at the incident of the initial Skyview Tower, spanning out into their family trees, showing everybody that's been born as a consequence of everybody surviving that. We've got everybody who's already been and died and exactly how they've died, as well as everybody who is yet to die and theories on how they could die. That's the first part of this compendium. The second part of this compendium is just a million ways that she could think of for anybody to accidentally, tragically, whatever die. It seems that the idea here is to just be very aware of your surroundings and to hyperfixate on anything that could possibly lead to an accidental death. But the method to the madness there is writing down literally everything she could think of to make that compendium. It's no wonder why she went insane like that. I mean, jeez. One other thing that I have to note is that inside of this book, she keeps that very penny that triggered the whole thing at the tower. A funeral is held for Grandma, and wouldn't you know, her daughter, Stephanie's mother, Darlene, arrives, and her estranged family is less than pleased to see her. Howard, though, having just lost his mother, is ecstatic to see his sister returned and invites her over for a memorial cookout. Stephanie hates this notion and opts to go home instead to look through Iris's book. At the party, everyone's living it up in celebration of life. Darlene brings over some cookies as a sign of goodwill, but we're gonna have to toss those out as Bobby has a major nut allergy. Avoiding the nuts, Bobby and Julia man the bar where a broken shard of glass manages to sneak its way into the icebox. From here, it's transferred into a glass and passed around the function. Multiple red herrings play out in classic Final Destination fashion, but while Stephanie sits at home, a broken picture frame and fallen shard of glass give her all the clues she needs to know that something's going wrong. She races to the house as our mousetrap continues on. A bottle falls onto a water hose, causing it to swell. This pushes free a rake that tips over and starts a lawnmower. As that lawnmower kicks forward. A Jenga tower causes the drink containing the shard of glass to spill over. Howard, unaware of all of this, steps on the shard of glass, falling back and positioning himself just right for the blades of the mower to rearrange his face. Another funeral is held, and the very next day, Stephanie decides it's time to share Iris's research with the rest of the family. Here we establish all of the rules for this film. We learn that Death has spent years combing over every survivor of the tower incident, or lack thereof, and it's taken so long as every time a family tree branch is extended, it adds another set of souls that need to be claimed. Now that Iris is gone, Death has come for their little family, knowing that it was never meant to exist. Taking who was first born into account, and who's only in the family by marriage, we now know the exact order that this is all going to go down in, with Eric next on the list. The family's reaction to this is not stellar, with most of them straight up offended that she'd bring Grandma's delusional baggage into things while they're all grieving. That night, while closing up his tattoo shop, Eric inks Dad onto his forearm in huge script before a chain fixed to the ceiling comes loose and, being swung around by a fan, manages to attach itself to his septum ring. Eric struggles to free himself, but in that struggle knocks over some alcohol in a lamp, causing the place to go up in flames. He frees himself from the chain, but this sends him crashing to the fire below. As the camera pans out and the building explodes, we're transferred to Stephanie as she wakes up in a panic. She goes to Charlie's room and gets him, exclaiming that they need to go check on their cousin, but when he drags himself out of bed, they discover the tattoo shop had burned down. They race on over to their uncle's house, and on the way there, they run straight into, what do you know, Eric himself. And he's fine. He survived due to his leather jacket, but not without a scratch. He did suffer a little heart branding right next to his dad's tattoo. Aw, how cute. During this talk, he dodges a speeding car, and Stephanie tries to warn him that he needs to be more careful out here. She acts excessively paranoid, pointing out some lawn equipment, a landscaper blowing leaves, and some kids playing soccer, stating that who knows, maybe a series of events could cause the ball to take him out. He thinks this is hilarious and jokes around with a garbage truck, but immediately after his sister Julia heads out for a jog, that exact series of events plays out, with the ball hitting her in the face, knocking her into a trash can, and the garbage truck dumping her into the trash compactor. The family tries their best to stop the truck, but the driver's just too busy scrolling Tinder, and Stephanie is forced to watch as her cousin is crushed to a paste. Once again assembled to grieve, the family reflects on Iris's theory, with most of the family now convinced of its legitimacy. Aunt Brenda here confesses to the family that Eric wasn't the first in line because he's actually a child of an affair she had. This obviously rumbles the family, but through the drama they conclude that this means Bobby is next. Marty is fed up with all of this, as the reason Darlene originally abandoned their family in the first place was because of this kind of paranoia. He absolutely doesn't agree with this and storms out in a rage. Bobby, on the other hand, presses Steph for any way out of this mess, and she reveals that there's a single survivor listed in Grandma's book, a man only known as JB. Darlene connects the dots, leading Stephanie, Charlie, Bobby, and Eric to a hospital in search of the man. Deep in the hospital, waiting in the morgue, JB turns out to be none other than William Bloodworth himself. He explains to the group that they are one of many that have stood before him asking the very same questions. He tells them that him and Iris had been very close. The two go all the way back to the Skyview Tower, where he was the little boy who died with her in the vision. Not the penny thrower, to be clear. This is the son of the singer. Now that she's finally passed, he knows that death will be coming for him as soon as it makes its way through their family. Establishing that this is his very last rodeo, Bloodworth gears up to enjoy his last days, offering up that the only way to break the chain is by dying or taking the life of another in exchange for more time. The only person who's managed to break it in the past was Final Destination 2's Kimberly, who we know was resuscitated after her death. Whew, man. Okay, so the Bloodworth speech is very heavy. This is one of my favorite parts of the movie, for real, and mainly because it felt like Tony Todd was addressing the camera, the audience, and us directly in this moment. The whole monologue is just very on the nose, and it hits extra special knowing that he's no longer with us now. I'm not exaggerating when I say that people in the theater were in tears at this moment. If you're a Tony Todd fan, if you're a horror fan, if you like Candyman or whatever have you, you've got to check this out right here. This makes the whole movie price of admission worth it, in my opinion. opinion. And what does this mean for Bloodworth and Final Destination as a whole? In my opinion, this is them telling us that this is going to be the last film. They could, in theory, make more Final Destination movies, and would I be surprised that Final Destination was coming out with another one? No, I definitely would not. But it seems to me that the intention in this monologue is just to really let us know that this is the end of an era and Tony Todd's signing off. Also, going into this thing, we were all wondering what they were going to say about Tony Todd, how his character of William Bloodworth would be fleshed out through this whole thing. And now we have our answers. He was not death himself. He's not a demon, and he's not a representation of the overall themes in the movie. Who William Bloodworth is just another survivor that's been living all these years trying to dodge death himself. As all these other survivors have came to him over the years asking him questions, his answers and experience of those have come from him himself dodging this thing all this time. It's very poetic. It's very interesting to know after all these years exactly where he stood in all this. Shouts out to the GOAT, man. Taking this knowledge to heart, Eric and Bobby devise a plan to let Bobby die just long enough to bring him back and break their chain by taking advantage of his nut allergy. First, they try to shake down a vending machine for some Reese's cups, but they only manage to bust a spring loose in the process, sneaking off to an MRI room to scarf down the Reese's cups. They accidentally activate the machine when a clipboard slides off a wall. Bobby gives Eric his EpiPen and then eats the forbidden candy. In a matter of moments, his throat closes shut and he collapses to the floor. By this time, the MRI machine is cranking up with its powerful magnets becoming highly reactive. So Eric is straight up covered in piercings, and one by one they begin to detach from his body, flying into the equipment. First he loses his facial piercings, and then his body piercings, and then his, oh god no, lower body piercings. His suffering is put to an end when a wheelchair straight up splits him in half and pulls his mangled body into the machine. Bobby, who doesn't have any jewelry, crawls to and administers his EpiPen to himself, just in time to save his life. Well, at least just in time to spare his life for a moment. A nurse opens the door, and the metal spring from the vending machine is rocketed through the air and into his head. With Stephanie, her mother, and brother now the only ones left, well, besides the father and aunt, who are at home and should be safe. Well, it should be. We just saw what happened to Eric. The family trio decide that the only way to stay safe is for Darlene to take the role as a hermit. She must lock herself in Iris's safe house to stay alive and subsequently keep her children alive too. Seemingly looking to confirm this, Death sends a logging truck their way, but they manage to halt just in time. Upon leaving the hospital, we see an old woman as she finds a penny on the ground, this one having fallen from Iris's book. When they make it to the house, the large iron gates block their path, and while looking for a way through, Stephanie eyes a sputtering electrical pole. Deciding this means Death is about to make a move, she floors it and rams Iris's defense system. This, gets them through, but the rubble and destruction from the crash send debris flying into their vehicle, breaking Stephanie's seatbelt. The electrical pole lands into the gutters, starting a fire, and even more debris is sent into Iris's home, causing her gas stove to break and gas to fill the environment. This combination of elements ignites when Darlene goes to enter the house, and an explosion sends her flying out of view. The force of the blast even tips the RV over, with Stephanie still trapped inside, now submerged into a pool of water. Even Charlie gets stuck under a massive chunk of the house. Darlene is the first to collect herself as she rises like Frankenstein's monster to free Charlie. She tells him to go save his sister and then is swiftly crushed by a falling pole. When Charlie reaches Steph, she's already losing her fight. He grabs a pocket knife and fights against her aimlessly flailing arms to cut through the seatbelt. In the process, he nearly loses a finger, but as he pries the knife from his hand, he pulls his sister from the car and resuscitates her successfully through CPR. Thinking back to Final Destination 2, this should do the job, right? 1 week later, Charlie prepares for his senior prom. Stephanie and Marty bask in a sense of security, knowing that their family had beaten Death's plan. As Charlie parades around with his date, Steph notices a string of events that remind her intensely of Iris's dream. As she gloats that her brother brought her back from the dead, his date's father notes on the technicality that her heart never actually stopped beating. She was only unconscious. A few blocks away, the old lady we saw at the hospital purchases some lemonade, grabbing coins from her purse. In the process, knocking a penny to the ground that rolls all the way to some train tracks, giving us an image eerily similar to the one at the start of the film. As the coincidences pile up for Stephanie, a passing train is derailed by that very penny and heads straight toward the two children. They run in terror, but just as they feel safe, logs from a log truck dislodge and crush the both of them. And wouldn't you know, that penny that was originally supposed to stop this whole bloodline from ever happening would be the same one that would put it all to an end. Okay, so what an insane ending, huh? Remember how I was talking about earlier about how grandma's house is insane? Well, look at it now. Look how right I was. They drive to this house expecting to keep the mom alive, to keep the rest of them alive, and they arrive at this big iron gate, and instead of taking their time to really figure out how to get in there, they see that Death's about to make a move, and then they ram the truck through the gate. What are we talking about? Why? Why would you do that? Why? Of course it's gonna go terribly wrong, and this entire dangerous property is gonna go up in flames and just murk everybody out. That's the only thing that could happen here. Whatever, man. I don't know. Was it an attempt at trying to be self-aware in some attempt? I really don't think so. I don't know what the whole point of that was, to be honest with you. The majority of the movie really sold me, but all the grandma house stuff just didn't make any sense in the least bit, and like really threw me off the trail. I just don't understand. At the end of the movie, we got that little Final Destination 2 style fake out. What'd you think about that? I thought it was interesting. I thought that it was kind of cool. They had us for a second, and then they blamed it on the technicalities so they could give us the more modernized Final Destination ending where everybody has to die at the end. Also, the implication here being that Bloodworth is next up on the list now that the family's gone. So maybe if they do make another Final Destination and they want to use the Bloodworth name in some capacity, they could piggyback off of that and try to do this thing again with his family tree or something like that. I don't know. Personally though, I think it would be better if they just left it here, left it off on a good note. I really don't want to have to go to a Final Destination movie without this man acting in it. But speaking of Final Destination 2, we scrapped that whole new life thing, didn't we? In Final Destination 2, there was a theory that maybe if somebody gave birth and broke the chain with new life, that would save everybody. Clearly, that is not what happens here. The rules in this new Final Destination are that if your time is here, then your time is here. Death is not going to skip you and move on to the next person, leaving you impervious for a little while. It will continue to hammer down on you over and over again until you eventually succumb, keeping only the rules from 2 and from 5, where in 2, if you die and then become resurrected, you'll break the chain, and in 5, if you kill somebody, you'll take their time on Earth. Those are the only 2 rules that exist in this universe. Again, there's no skipping, there's no new life breaking the chain, none of that stuff. We also didn't touch on any of the stuff that exists in Final Destination 1, where Death had like a physical form or anything like that. Death's not doing anything where he's cleaning up his messes or blaming anything on anybody. We do, for some reason, gender Death as he in this movie, so it does get like a little bit of humanization in some capacity. Yesterday, I made a video talking about what Death is in the Final Destination universe, and the only thing that this has told me is that it's not Bloodworth's character. But if you're interested in that theory discussion, then hop onto my video from yesterday. I got more on that. There was an interesting point in this movie though, talking about people who have premonitions versus people who are just taught to be excessively paranoid. We learned that Steph and Charlie's mother, Darlene, actually went insane because her mother wanted to teach her to learn this book of a million different things that could happen to you that could kill you accidentally, and to live your entire life in paranoia of that. She wasn't having premonitions. She didn't have like a special psychic gift that let her know what was going on. She just actually lost her mind. And Iris 100% lost her mind in the pursuit of all of this knowledge and trying to understand this thing that was happening to her. The very same thing probably would have happened to Steph if she had made it out a little bit longer. But it's interesting to make that kind of connection and show those kind of parallels here, how that could affect different kinds of people. It's also interesting to note that they described the visions as being able to be passed on to somebody. Why were the visions passed from Iris to Stephanie? That's not really touched on. It seems to be a matter of circumstance. It's not explained why Iris had the visions in the first place, but it is explained that as she's dying, she stops having them, and then Stephanie just starts having them. It's very strange. Also, the premonition that she's having isn't of anybody in her life dying, it's just of that Iris premonition over and over again. She does seem to be able to line up the pieces, like seeing warnings written in the sand in her timeline though. So for sure, there's something going on there with her. This opening scene is extremely long, and there is so much going on. All of our classic Final Destination setups are there, where we get like little nods to different characters as they're going through the premonition, almost as if you'd expect them to be main characters moving into the rest of the movie, but they're not. They don't show back up later. And there's so many red herrings that we point out that it just had me like so nervous on the edge of my seat. I wasn't sure what was going to trigger these incidences. All in all though, I really liked Final Destination Part 6. Bloodlines was a really good time. I am a Final Destination fan, though I didn't really like the last 2 as much as the rest of them, and I'm really happy to say that this was my favorite one that I've seen in a while. The grandma's stuff house did definitely take me out a little bit, but the majority of the movie is really solid. It's extremely funny, it's extremely bloody, and William Bloodworth's send-off in this thing could not have been done better. Perfect perfect execution right there, I tell you. But how'd you guys feel about it? Comment below and let me know. How did you guys feel about Final Destination Part 6? Did it turn out to be everything you wanted it to be? How do you feel about William Bloodworth's character, and do you think that Final Destination can go on without him? How'd you feel about all the CG kills? Did they take you out of it, or were you able to like them just because of how disgusting they were? However you're feeling about the movie, definitely let me know. Also, while you're at it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content just like this. If you enjoyed my video today, be sure to browse my catalog. You may find some other videos you may enjoy as well. And if you really liked my video, be sure to send it over to a friend you think might like it too. As always, I've been Utter's Terror, and whether your day's been going good or bad today, I hope it gets better.